Chris Harris Jr. has proven himself to be one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. Even though Harris has seldom collected accolades such as Pro Bowl, IV, and All-Pro (thre) honors, Denver Broncos fans know he is one of the best in the game. He's entering the final year of his contract, at a base salary of $7.8 million, plus a $100,000 workout bonus, and the extension he signed back in 2015 is by far the best bargain among all Bronco players. Most Broncos fans would argue that it's long overdue for Harris to get paid well for his services. But John Elway has indicated that the Broncos won't visit that issue until after the NFL draft. Fans are dying to know, why would Denver wait until after that point to take care of business? Cap space isn't an issue per se. First of all, cap space really isn't that much of an issue. Although the Broncos have about $11.7 million in cap space, per over the cap, they don't need it all for draft picks at this time. Because the top 51 cutoff is in effect at this point in the offseason, the effective cap space the Broncos need for their draft picks, assuming they don't move up or down the board at any point, is a little more than $4 million. To be sure, Harris's cap number is likely to increase should the Broncos extend him this year. That's because Harris's base salary isn't large, so there's no real justification in rolling any of that money into a signing bonus. Instead, the Broncos would give Harris a signing bonus with any extension and prorate the first year of that into 2019. All about the cash. However, while the signing bonus is prorated for cap purposes, the main concern for the Broncos is how the signing bonus affects the team for cash purposes. This may be why the Broncos haven't yet extended Harris. To explain, when you extend a player, the signing bonus is considered part of your cash spent in the year the extension is signed, even though it's not all paid at once. Basically, the team is effectively setting aside cash that year, to be paid to the player at a later time. Thus, it's essentially budgeted for the current year, even if it's not all paid that year. And because the draft hasn't taken place yet, the Broncos have no idea which players they will be able to obtain and if any of those picks will allow the Broncos to trade veteran players already on the roster. And in some of these cases, the Broncos are committing a fair amount of cash to those players. Let's use an example. The Broncos have offensive guard Ronald Leary on the roster and he is due $8.15 million in base salary, of which $5.35 million is fully guaranteed. He's also due $400,000 in roster and workout bonuses. This is cash that the Broncos, at this time, have to be prepared to commit to Leary. Get access to 100% of our deep dive draft content, Broncos film breakdowns and our insider forum by becoming a Mile High Huddle 247 Sports VIP subscriber. Be the most informed Broncos fan you can be. Subscribe today. However, if the Broncos draft an interior offensive lineman early, that opens the door for them to trade Leary. Doing so would free the Broncos of all that cash, thus giving them more cash they could commit to Harris in an extension. It's likely the Broncos didn't trade Leary earlier this year for two reasons. 1. Leary was injured last season and couldn't be traded until he could pass a physical. 2. The team wanted to keep him at least until they are comfortable with other interior offensive linemen on the roster. Thus, it makes sense for the Broncos to wait until the draft to trade Leary. If Denver doesn't trade Leary, that doesn't mean Harris won't be extended. But if the Broncos know they have more cash available, they can commit more cash to a signing bonus for Harris. Why is that important? Accommodating Harris's contractual demands because Harris is likely to seek a lot of fully guaranteed money and the Broncos would like to structure it so that it's paid out as early as possible in the contract. This brings us to the money Harris and his agent will likely seek in an extension. The New York Jets gave Trumaine Johnson $34 million in full guarantees in the deal he signed in 2018, with an additional $11 million in injury-only guarantees. Harris and his agent will likely want to exceed those amounts, perhaps wanting the full guarantees to be new money. On the new money point, keep in mind the $7.9 million Harris is due this year already exists. An extension will make that money fully guaranteed, but if Harris and his agent want, say, $36 million in full guarantees beyond his current salary, that's more money the Broncos would have to be willing to commit if they agree to that. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Harris and his agent will take $38 million in full guarantees, to include his 2019 base salary. Let's say that the Broncos give Harris a $10 million signing bonus and round up his 2019 base salary to $8 million, giving him a $10 million cap hit this year. That accounts for $18 million of the full guarantees, requiring the Broncos to spread the remaining $20 million out in later years. The Broncos aren't going to put all of that remaining money into 2020, because that would result in a $22 million cap hit, and that's too high for a cornerback. The Broncos could spread the $20 million out over 2020 and 2021 in a $10 million base salary each year, resulting in a $12 million cap hit each year, then give him an injury-only guaranteed salary in 2022 of, say, $12 million, for a $14 million cap hit, resulting in $50 million in total guarantees. But if the Broncos want to get all the fully guaranteed money placed into the years 2019 and 2020, they won't be able to do that with a $10 million signing bonus and $8 million base salary this year. They either need to raise the signing bonus or raise the 2019 base salary. Either option means more cash committed in 2019. So it really isn't a question of whether the Broncos want to extend Harris or not, it's a question of how much cash they can commit to him this year, which then determines what the finer points of the contract will look like. If the Broncos can trade a player who frees up cash commitments currently on the books, they can give more fully guaranteed money to Harris this year, rather than spreading it out over future years. Bottom line is, for Harris's holdout, I wouldn't be concerned at this point. What Harris is doing is no different from what Von Miller did back in 2016 when he got the franchise tag. Yet despite some rough patches, Miller and the Broncos ultimately agreed to an extension. The time to become concerned about Harris's future is if he skips mandatory workouts, particularly when training camp gets underway. But until then, Broncos fans should assume Harris is simply using the same tried-and-true tactics Miller used. It's the player's way of trying to keep the team honest in negotiations and making it clear he isn't going to take just any deal he's presented. But the question of how much cash the Broncos can commit to Harris this year is a legitimate question, simply because that affects the contract structure. After the draft, the Broncos will have a better idea where things stand with the roster and if it's possible to trade a player. Either way, I wouldn't be surprised to see Harris and the Broncos agree to an extension before the start of the regular season. The Broncos know how valuable Harris is, but they simply need a better idea about how to structure the fully guaranteed money they would commit to him. Let's block ads. Why?